Hello, hoping you're doing great. Welcome to our new lecture together. Hoping you're also ready to start this together. I already posted several lectures on the Moodle, hoping you started to study them to be ready to send me any questions you have. So today's will be the third lecture on civil society. Let's start together. Okay, today we are going to discuss the remaining part of civil society. We're going to talk about functions of civil society. Before talking about the function, let's see a nice chart together. This is one of the most important charts that facilitate the understanding of civil society, position, definitions, and relations with other components of the community. As you see, the chart is divided into two sections. The right section on the screen describing the role of civil society as intermediate sphere among the political, the economic sector, and family, or what we call it private sector, and we'll come to this soon. On the left side, it describes the civil society as an independent sector, and it draws lines between how civil society interact with and among all these sectors inside the community. Let's start with number B, civil society as an intermediate sphere. As intermediate, we said that civil society could include part of families, part of economic, but it's not for profit. It could be include part of families, tribes, etc., but it's a homogeneous. It is not a homogeneous structure. It could include many citizens with various identities. With the political track, definitely once this structure or this body or the organizations of civil society will interfere and interact in building policies or in implementing certain projects or in building certain tracks in development or relieving or etc etc. So definitely there will be a point where either to cooperate with the government or they will be in need of certain facilitation or permissions or etc etc. So and the other side, they cannot serve the community without the support of certain legal issues, if you want to call it, and they cannot be very representative if their existence inside the community, whether it would be physical or even online, will be accepted by the government in a way or another, even if this acceptance was forced. Let's go back to the chart on the left side, which is civil society as a sector. I want you to follow the lines and to see that civil society could have relation as a sector with all these sectors, but many thinkers would like to describe civil society as a separate one, as a sector which is independent in a way. Like definitely they have connection with government. Definitely they have these organizations, I mean the organizations of civil society might have good relation with the community, families, private sector, might have great cooperation with the economic sphere, etc., etc. But we should see it as a separate, independent sector that exists and equal level with other sectors in the community. So I hope this chart helps you to understand the vertical and horizontal interaction levels and functions of civil society organizations. Okay. After discussing and seeing the interaction levels to whether it was horizontal or vertical, let's start to discuss the functions of civil society. Actually, there are several different and various functions of civil society based on the structure, the interactions, etc., etc. But we will address the most important functions and the most basic functions that we can call it the core functions, and that everyone from the thinkers, philosophers, and politicians agreed upon these functions. After actually following the literature that described the existence of civil society and the various discussions about the functions, some of the functions described probably will seem familiar. Others could be unknown. Others might be very agreed upon, others not. But all this discussion agreed upon certain functions, as we're going to see in the following slides. Number one, many thinkers argued that one important and particular role and function for civil society organizations is protection. Protective function. Civil society has a duty to provide freedom for citizens and to protect them from the authority of the state, or maybe they should be a shield to help people to achieve their interests. As we said before, it could be the sound of people, whether the government was doing this purposely, like whether the government was ignoring people's interest in a purpose way, or people were incapable to raise their voice. The first function that all thinkers agreed upon, that civil society organizations are responsible to protect the freedom and the rights of citizens. It is included protection against state interference in the private sphere and ensure the availability of a private space as well as society. Organizations of civil society must be involved in certain issues. For example, to check the draft policy regarding securing fundamental rights of citizens, and in the case of any offenses, to attract attention and to take steps to react against these offenses. For example, the protection and particular minorities and their rights to be in an equal level of other citizens inside the country, or inside the law and the constitution. So the first function is to protect the general rights or the human rights or the general freedom set rights for citizens in an equal equal and let's say it parallel level to others against the authority of the state. So here it could be in a way the sound of people to protect themselves. Okay, let's talk about a second function. The second function here could be participation. What do we mean by participation? Why do you think civil society could function in participation, or what kind of participation we mean here? This is socialization of democratic and participatory citizenship. Do you remember when we said that civil society progressed or developed in a parallel level with democracy? This is exactly the reason behind this function. Many thinkers thought that the existence of civil society will be very supportive towards establishing democratic communities and societies. It could also be described as the core requirement and excellence in political culture. This refers an increase in interest in politics, increased motivation and ability to participate in political events. Moreover, in the context, in other words, the existence of civil society organizations could encourage the progress of democratic communities, could facilitate the track, pave the way in front of communities to be more democratic and more participating with the state. It could minimize the gap between the government and the community and the citizenship. It is strengthening the democracy and recruit targeted way for democratic elites and decision-making state. Let's have an example for the participation as we did with the previous function, which was protection. For example, civil society organization will enhance the political participation of youth or with women or workers. It could create representative units for other sectors inside the community. It could present sectors that were not represented inside the elections or inside the political participation track, or were out of the regulations or the decision-making process. So whenever there would be a decision-making track or process, civil society organizations must interfere to allow more space for citizens, sectors, workers, women, etc., other individuals inside the community to be participating in a much active and strong way. So number one was protection. Number two, participation. Let's move to number three. Number three, the control function. What do we mean? Often this function is also called the security of freedom in the negative. It depends on protective function in a way, since this is the observation and the control political power. One of the fundamental obligations under the oversight function is, for example, election monitoring to ensure the fair, transparent, the fundamental rules of democracy. And this is one of the most ambiguous and controversial functions, because certain governments are accusing civil society organizations to be attacking the sovereignty of the government, accusing the organizations to interfere in the inner business of the communities by, for example, forcing certain norms or watching certain policies or stopping certain policies by the governments, etc., etc. So the function of control or taking control over certain policies or attitudes by the government is one of the core functions, of course, but still a very controversial function. Number four, the function of relief. And this is one of the most easy, common, well-known, spread functions all over the world, especially in poor countries, communities, etc. In several areas, civil society contributes to easy, to facilitate, to help people, communities. In the narrow sense, the state, the government, and politics are in need of the support of these organizations. On the other hand, there's an effective financial relief by these organizations by the fact that citizens voluntarily endorse and often without compensation social obligations. Therefore, it's still a reduction in the direction of increased efficiency. Today, society is faced with complex new issues which called mega problems and that cannot be resolved at the state level only. These problems must be addressed on several levels actually. These include, for example, globalizations, environmental problems, diseases like COVID-19, etc., etc. These problems are growing in a very fast, dynamic, and controllable level. Civil society organizations are doing their best to be part of the solutions. Civil society meets social obligations, go beyond the family, but at the same time are enough taken into account by the forms of representation of interest of organizations established, and that neither the market nor the state cannot resolve probably. We may take an example, and mutual support groups which are becoming increasingly money. Members of these groups are often in a difficult situation. They are disoriented, strongly depressed, hopeless, in a way isolated. This type of group usually replaces the definition or the affiliation to the family towards other resources, which remains without resources to this type of personal problems. In general, the function of relief nowadays is one of the most important and critical functions. Let's see the last problem, crisis in Lebanon, the explosion in Lebanon last month. Definitely the government in Lebanon will be unable to deal with all these consequences and problems. Definitely the existence of civil society or even international NGOs will help very much in supporting and dealing with these problems. So relieving, it could be economic, could be cultural, educational, could be to face certain problems like what happened in Lebanon, what is going on with COVID-19, etc., etc. The fifth function could be the articulation function. After discussing the previous four, articulation could be one of the modern functions of civil society organization. Civil society can contribute to opening channels of effective production, assembly, and articulation of community values and social interests outside of political parties and parliaments. The private and social issues are now dealt with by civil society and convened with political opinion. Civil society acts as intermediate party or intermediate body between citizens and states. Citizen initiatives are an example of articulation function of society. Citizens will often address problems in one area of experience, direct and organize themselves to act directly without passing through parties or associations or on the trial or unacceptable situation they consider dangerous. Initiatives citizens are often formed, for example, in the case of transport of nuclear waste. In other words, articulation is a result or outcome of certain needs that citizens can feel and decide to express a way of the government. Reaching the sixth function, we can say the function of democratization. In the previous level, we were saying that it is a parallel of democracy by encouraging participation. Here, we're going to talk another dimension of civil society encouraging and interference in the community. This is the contribution of civil society in the process itself of formation of public opinion and popular will. The idea of civil society play an important role in democratization and forming people opinion and tendencies, especially at local level. In young democracies, this function is often dependent on the evaluation of democracy at national level, where citizens and citizen initiatives are also concrete as one of the most important examples how civil society affect the tendencies of young people. In this context, information sessions are often organized to inform the public about particular topics or issues. They contribute to the process of building opinions, of opinion formation and public enthusiasm. Other groups, maybe local or regional, might organize discussion sessions, weekly, monthly, awareness sessions, campaigns that would help people to know more and to adapt certain thinking track, to be belonging to certain case or certain ideology, if you want to. Belonging to civil society also produce an effective and active work in the serve of democratic process of building opinions inside the communities. Okay, let's go to a new function. Number 7, as we said before when we saw the chart together, civil society would stand in the middle as a mediator among sectors in the community. So the 7th function would be intermediation between state and citizens. Civil society must ensure a balance between central authority and social networks and the existence of citizens in a way. It could also be safeguarding for rules, law, and protect citizens from these laws in a way or another. This function focuses on the permanent exchange of self-organized associations with the state in order to control, limit, and influence the activities of the state against citizens, or the implementation of norms, laws, or even taxations, or the emergency role under certain situations against citizens, of course. Okay, let's move to another function. Number 8, it could be participatory socialization. This function stresses that civil society and associations are schools of democracy. People learn how to execute their democratic rights even on a basic level. People will acquire the capacities of being citizens, participating in public life, developing their trust, being more confident, more tolerant, to accept others, to build a landscape of acceptance, tolerance, a more tolerant community for more democratic states and society. This also supports the decentralization of power and the creation of solidarity among citizens, both of which act as defense mechanisms against possible attacks on their freedoms and to assure that freedoms are untouchable. Okay. Number 9, community building and interaction. This is one of the most important and interesting actually functions. Civil society is seen as a catalyst for several virtues and as an antidote to individualism and retreat to family and statism. Thus, participation in social organizations helps to bridge social cleavages, to create several virtues, and to foster social cohesion. It also satisfies the needs of individuals to develop bonds and attachments with each other and with the community, and in a relation with each other. On the other hand, the self-organization of civil society doesn't take place purely under ethnic, religious, or racist tendencies. So, as we mentioned before, it could build a new identity, a new track that combines people under one identity. So, building new communication tracks, new identity. Public communication is the core function of civil society, actually, in deliverable outcomes and in enhancing democratic models in the community. It stressed the importance of a free public sphere, separated from the state, separated from the economy, from the religion, from the ethnicity, blah, 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 where people can have separate rooms for debates, for participation, expressing their ideas, their interests themselves, and to build a new track of common identity under democratic decision-making process. Okay, the previous 10 functions could be in a way common, but as you know, definitely day by day we can have a lot of thinkers, philosophers who were trying to understand, to explain civil society and the change in the entire international atmosphere also force new functions for civil society organizations. And we have what thinkers call extended functional approach, which through they were trying to establish a new understanding for the functions. We have a lot of thinkers under this approach, actually, and a lot of attempts were there to explain the track of progress, the new functions, a lot of thinkers, etc., etc., and they were trying to build a new model composing the new 7 functions, enabling better understanding of the existence of civil society, not only in the local level, but regionally, internationally, and explaining the function of civil society and social, economic, and political developmental process. These functions could be summarized as following. In the previous level, we were talking about protection in general, but here we are talking about higher level of protection. Protection not only against law, but also against certain circumstances, certain threats, whether locally, internationally, or regionally. Number 2, monitoring for accountability. This function consists of monitoring the activities of central powers, state, government. This is also a way to control central authorities and hold them to implement things. It is also similar to the previous functions, but in this, it is giving more authority to the society, not only to mentor, but also to sue these governments and to stop certain policies or certain norms that the government could take. Number 3, it could be advocacy and public communication. An important task of civil society is its ability to articulate interests, especially of marginalized groups, and to create channels of communication in order to bring them to to bring them to the public agenda, thereby raising public awareness and facilitating debate and making things more visible to others, not only to the government. It's like enable everyone to be part of the general debate of the community. And developmental process, cooperation, civil society, spotlight on every certain sector and citizen inside the government and the community. Socialization is number 4. With its rich association and network and relation and connection inside the community, Civil society contributes to formulate certain attitudes, certain agenda, and it helps people to develop certain values, if you want. Democracy is not only a track or attitude, it's a set of values, a set of institutions, set of um, participatory and implementary attitudes inside the community. Number 5, building community. Engagement and participation in voluntary associations also has the potential to strengthen bonds among citizens, building social capital. In cases where associations include members from other ethnic or social groups, it also bridges social gap. It contributes to build social cohesion among other societies, not only inside one community. It could also be cross communities, as what happened with the Palestinian issues recently. Number 6, intermediate between certain components. It's not only the state and the people as used to happen. It could be intermediate between international NGO or international affiliates or international bodies and units like UN, UNICEF, etc., with local affairs inside the state itself. Number 7, serve as certain delivery agencies. The direct provision of services to citizens is an important activity of civil society associations, such as self-help groups, especially in cases where the state is weak. It becomes essential to provide shelter, health, education. As we said before, this is exactly the case of COVID-19, but it is more legal, it is legitimate, it is part of the global structure nowadays to provide this kind of services. We reached to the last part of our lecture today. The puzzle of today would be that I want you to describe one situation that you feel NGO or one of the NGO was responsible to solve the problem in it. Thank you so much for joining me for this lecture. Hoping you're doing great. Be safe and always remember, things are exactly how you want to see it. It is not how it is. Thank you so much. See you soon.